I've played the majority of Sony's first party games. I used to think I was the audience for this sort of thing. You know, the ones highly polished, usually third person perspective, story driven third person shooter or an action game with that polish of beauty across all of it that Sony was known for. Because of this, Sony dominated during the PS4 generation. Hits like God of War 2018, Spider-Man, Last of Us Part 1, Bloodborne even. These were all games that people lauded as being the absolute best games of their time for the most part. It was if at this time anyway, Sony could do no wrong. Then, as I'm sure you know, something shifted in the PS5 generation as well. Everything just became more diverse, but not in the best ways. And I started to notice that every single PlayStation 5 exclusive game pretty much was doing something similar. They were all collectively pushing similar concepts that have done nothing but really alienate their core audiences. So I've been playing Saros. I'm at the end of the game myself. I will spoil the game's ending later on in this video, and I'll let you know when I do that, but it won't be right now, so just relax. But I've been playing it. Funny enough, the game also glitched during the final boss encounter, so I had to exit the game and I lost my entire run progress, which was, great, because I had the final boss dead to rights. Thanks, Modern Gaming. I love it when my games glitch like that. Anyways, it took me somewhere around 12 hours to reach Saros' ending, but as I played Saros, the game immediately proved to me that it doesn't matter which Sony exclusive I'm playing anymore, unless it's Astro Bot, that every single Sony PS5 exclusive is just doing the same thing. What do I mean by this? Well, Saros is a lot like Spider-Man 2, Last of Us 2, Ghost of Yotei, and many more. It's a game that just refuses to kind of get out of its own way and keeps looping back to the same core problems that also keep plaguing almost everything that Sony is making these days from a first-party perspective. Look, I'm going to fully admit, when it came to Saros' gameplay, it is excellent. Its music and its sound design are top-notch. The loop of dying and repeating is fine, and the way the game feels to play again is second to none. I have zero issues with Saros when it comes to the gameplay or anything like that. When it comes to actually playing it, yeah, it's great. It's very evident that when it comes to Sony first-party games, there is a standard that is constantly being met, which is that all these games play and sound and look very good. Spider-Man 2 was the same way, as was Last of Us 2, and more, right? But where Saros falters is unequivocally in the same exact spot that every other PS5 exclusive and some PS4 games do as well, and it is the story and the characters. The entire time I was playing Saros, I kept thinking to myself, wow, this game looks great, its gameplay is fun, and I love the sound design with my headphones on. And every time when I would die and then be ripped from that experience, which was fun, I would then be thrown into the main hub, which is called the Passage. And in this area, like Hades and such as well, you can then speak to the NPCs and learn more about them, but you kinda don't want to. Because see, the problem with Saros, like pretty much every Sony first-party exclusive these days, is that nobody is rated in these games to be compelling anymore. Instead, these stories, they feel like an afterthought to an otherwise great game from a design perspective alone. The elevator pitch here is that Saros is about a guy named Arjun Devraj, who is a part of like a space colonization group named Echelon, which is funded by a mega corporation named Soltari. So this Soltari wants to send these colonists to a far distant planet called Carcosa. Because on Carcosa, there's this weird substance called leucinite that Soltari is very interested in obtaining, of course. Then Arjun, however, forces himself into this Echelon program, not because he cares about Carcosa or the leucinite stuff, but simply because he wants to find his estranged girlfriend or wife, I guess, who's also on the same mission, whose name is Nitya. So Nitya is like a scientist, engineer lady, and she's a part of Echelon as well, and she leaves Arjun behind on Earth for reasons unknown. Anyway, the game starts and Arjun is on Carcosa already, and you meet his fellow Echelon members, and again, you wish you wouldn't, but you have to. Because none of these people are memorable whatsoever. There's an old Asian guy with a bald head and glasses named Tak. He's the pilot of the group. He also goes by they/them pronouns, which just feels completely out of place for an elderly Asian man to go by. Then there's a leader of the group, whose name is Sheridan, who's played by the same voice actor who played the main character in Returnal, that's Housemarque's previous game. She's also, unsurprisingly, a nothing character. And then there's Kayla, that's your tech girl, who honestly doesn't actually provide you with any tech at all. Instead, Kayla just kind of cries a lot and doom pills the group because they're never getting off Carcosa, I guess. And none of these characters are interesting, and that is sort of the problem with Saros, but it gets worse than that too, which I'll get into later on in the video when I speak about spoilers. For now, what matters is that Seiros at its core is a game where the gameplay is very good, the sound design is amazing, and the world design is great. But when it comes to the actual gameplay side of Seiros, yes, Housemarque knocked it out of the park, I will not deny that. Yet like every other PS5 exclusive to some capacity, Housemarque, like Naughty Dog, Insomniac, and more, they all failed when it came to the heart of what ties these games together, which again is a story and the characters. God of War Ragnarok, that's a fun game to play. The combat is very, very good. The level up systems and all that, it works like intended. I like the exploration in it, I like the music and the sound design, and technically speaking, God of War Ragnarok is a great game, very hand-holdy, but it is a fun game to play. But it falls apart because the story at its core and how it's presented is not nearly as good as God of War 2018, and by the time you're done Ragnarok, you feel underwhelmed, like you just played an amazing action RPG where the story and the characters just cannot match the rest of the systems that are going on around it. Spider-Man 2, technically speaking as well, is an amazing game from its gameplay, its sound design, its world, the combat. It's a huge sprawling New York City where you can fling yourself as Spider-Man across it like with smooth FPS and all that too. Stopping crime like jumping on a car, webbing it up, taking out criminals in the streets, and generally speaking just being Spider-Man are all the sort of dreams that Insomniac they meet and they make an amazing experience to have. The sound design, the controls of Spider-Man 2 are also phenomenal, but then you get to its story and its characters. And it's probably one of the worst characterized versions of these Marvel characters that I've ever seen. Peter Parker is depowered, Miles beats Peter at every turn that he can, Mary Jane is somehow able to fight symbiotes and knock out Kraven goons like she's Lara Croft. By the end of Spider-Man 2, the collective opinion of many that played it is that it's a great game that makes you feel like Spider-Man, as generic as that sounds. But if you tear down its story piece by piece and analyze it, or its characters, or how Insomniac treats people like Peter Parker specifically, then the entire game's plot and characters and motivations fall apart and it feels malicious in its intent to do so. Then you have The Last of Us Part 2, technically again speaking, a flawless game. Nobody can deny that it doesn't have excellent gameplay and insane attention to detail where it comes to like the reload animations, how Ellie's body moves, and how it all reacts to the world around her, and how realistic the reactions of even the enemies are when you shoot and hunt them too. Then there's the clickers and the zombies. Like my god, the sound design of Naughty Dog's audio team is next to masterful. Everything sounds incredible. The music as well is beautiful, and the voice acting even is everyone involved just giving it their all. The game's environments are beautiful. The way the art team at Naughty Dog gave it their all, they truly made The Last of Us Part 2 into a masterful game in terms of its design, and that should be applauded. But again, there's the story and the characters, which it feels like a betrayal of what Last of Us fans wanted to see. We all know, right? Joel dies. There's no point in even calling that a spoiler. Literally everybody knows that it happens. It's like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker's like parental thing. Like everyone knows this, okay? And the entire story of Last of Us Part 2, it makes less sense the more you think about it. Like why would Ellie spare Abby after wiping out dozens of people who had nothing to do with Joel's death? Why would she stop at Abby when she had her dead to rights? Because it wouldn't change anything? That's stupid. The girl you stab in the neck who's playing Hotline Miami in that game also had nothing to do with Joel dying, yet Ellie stabbed her all the same anyways. The characters of Last of Us Part 2 also make little sense too. Ellie does all the heavy lifting. Her girlfriend Dina, who's basically the community of Jackson's dispenser for everybody to use for recreational things before she gets pregnant, is just a character that doesn't add much of anything to the game that really matters. Every other character besides maybe Tommy, I guess, either feels like a betrayal of what they were before, or someone who is just there to get shot or whatever, so Neil Druckmann can look you deep in your eyes and say, isn't violence bad? Violence is bad, isn't it? Didn't Joel deserve what happened to him? Well, not really, because the Fireflies were carving up anybody they could find who even had a lick of an immunity to the virus. So no, Joel was totally justified in wiping those weirdos out too. And then there's Abby with her little friend who's somehow having access to puberty blockers to become a boy in a post-apocalyptic world somehow, where things like basic medicine is about as rare as gold is, but don't think about that or you're a bigot, I guess. Horizon Forbidden West is about a red-headed hunter girl named Aloy, who originally in Zero Dawn, that's the previous game, could actually choose who she wants to romance, like you get to choose as the player. Now in Forbidden West, and especially its DLC Burning Shores, that's thrown away now because it's confirmed that Aloy is now canonically a lesbian. Did I mention that the main villain of Forbidden West, a PS5 game by first-party Sony devs, is the long-lost lesbian lover of Aloy's original version and wants her to love her again, pretty much? Horizon, the same game where Aloy goes from being an interesting new protagonist in Zero Dawn to suddenly becoming as robotic as the very cyber dinosaurs you hunt in Forbidden West, to the point that Aloy barely has a character in the sequel, man, not to mention in Forbidden West. The developers who tried to be inclusive end up making the only black couple in the game end with the woman becoming a single mother, which is kind of insane, but they did that. Horizon is also a game where everyone who's in a seat of power conveniently is almost always a woman, with only the big native looking guy who runs the clans being one of the only men in a position of power that is not corrupted. Yet the amount of women who run things in that world is just insane in Horizon, especially considering that it's a world where modern sensibilities wouldn't even exist. Yet men are apparently just weaker somehow physically. I don't know. Like Horizon Forbidden West, just like every other game mentioned, is also the same. Technically impressive, the gameplay is good, the sound design is great, the music is good, the world is vast, and everything looks amazing. But it, like every other game mentioned, already falls in the same pits and loops of stupidity that every single other PlayStation 5 first-party game does these days, and it's so annoying. I'm not even done, by the way. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, probably the least egregious of the bunch since it is meant for kids. But is it any wonder how conveniently alongside every single other Sony first-party PS5 game, that this series, which follows a male hero Lombax, suspiciously suddenly has a female counterpart who's just as good if not even better than he is. Like, this just keeps happening. Ghost of Yote, like, where do you even begin with this one? They decided it was better to chase a basic revenge plot over a potential sequel to Tsushima. Yet you look in, and it's just another game which ends with two women raising a young girl as all the men are like conveniently passing away pretty much in that game's story too. Sure, we have Wolverine and Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet coming up next, but do I have any hope that these games will somehow break this cycle of progressiveness and annoyance in like every single way imaginable? Honestly, not yet, not really, no. Is it any wonder why Astro Bot, which is basically Super Mario Odyssey but with PlayStation characters, is so beloved the way that it is? Because that game's just fun, where you just run around with basically zero story or nonsense beating you over the head constantly. Instead, Astro Bot's just a game where you collect cool little collectibles, you explore the PlayStation themed levels, and Astro Bot is more of what I would honestly want from Sony personally, because at least with Astro Bot, Sony is leaning intentionally heavy into the best aspects of their games that actually work, which is, again, like I keep saying in this video, the gameplay, the audio design, the controls, and the actual worlds that you can explore. Astro Bot is also, thank God, devoid of any stupid nonsense. Instead of yet another game where women are amazing and men suck for the God knows how many time, Astro Bot is just, here, look, you can find Solid Snake or Kratos, but they're cute little robots. Isn't that cool? Is it really any wonder the only PS5 exclusive title to win Game of the Year at the Game Awards so far is Astro Bot, because it was actually just pure game design, and it leaned heavily into what Sony's actually good at, and it didn't have like some weird activist weirdos saying that they align with the like Antifa like in Yote, or any of the other usual nonsense that comes as baggage with these sorts of games, in case you haven't noticed already. The thing that is ruining PlayStation's first-party games are not the gameplay designers or the sound engineers or the art department either. All of these people, no matter what studio they're at, and they are working and they are making their side of the game that they work on phenomenal across the board. Nobody's going to deny that Last of Us Part 2 looks or plays amazing, because it does. No one will say to your face that Horizon's graphics are bad somehow, because they're not, they're great. Or that Spider-Man 2's web slinging isn't near perfect and how it's executed in the game every single time. Because all of these elements are so fine-tuned and made to work that it's incredible. Like, it's such a nice sheen over all of it. Yet, also, with all of these games, such a shame how any of the games I mentioned, besides Astro Bot, because I love Astro Bot, they are all being torn apart and ruined by one specific thing that every one of these game studios keep doing, which is their writers. The people crafting these stories and characters cannot, for the life of them, just get out of their own way, man. They, just like the main character in Saros, are just stuck in an endless loop of insufferably annoying whataboutisms that just keep repeating themselves no matter the setting. Every game, it could be robot dinosaurs, clicker zombies, Norse, dwarves and elves, multi-dimensional Lombaxes, or even superheroes. They all just loop back to the same problem no matter which studio it is or what game they're making or even the setting too. It's like there's a mandate to make the best possible games imaginable, cook in every single department across the spectrum from the gameplay to the sound to the art, and then just have it all be undermined because the writers are legit crazy people who think the entire world and every story needs to reflect their real world biases, and that's it. How is it that every single PlayStation 5 exclusive that isn't called Astro Bot, or I guess Demon Souls, but that's a remix, doesn't really count, are all just pushing similar progressive design ideas, and they all coincidentally have similar elements to all of their stories? Which is that all men are to some degree weak and destructive, the women are always amazing and flawless, and for some reason, all of these stories to some degree have strong LGBT LGBT elements too, which again, that is across most of them too. If maybe it was one game, like, okay, Ellie is gay in The Last of Us, cool, whatever, right? That was like a one-off thing, it's fine. But then you're like, Aloy's gay now too? Kratos, the guy who beat the whole Greek pantheon's getting beaten by an old witch lady in Ragnarok? What? What do you mean that Spider-Man 2 depowers Peter Parker and makes him grovel at Miles' feet? And then, of course, there's Seiros, the next new first-party Sony game. Oh my god, that was a lot to explain, but it was important. But Seiros unfortunately reflects and echoes every single criticism I brought up about every other game mentioned in this video. Again, like an endless loop, we have another PlayStation first-party game where the men are awful, the women are amazing, and the male characters get cooked because of toxic masculinity or whatever, again. So here is where I will speak about the spoilers of Seiros. If you do not want to hear the spoilers of this game's story, which honestly, it's what you would expect to happen anyways, then skip to this time code on screen here, okay? Are you still here for this segment? Don't get mad if I spoil this game's story now, alright? I gave you the warning. Here we go. So it turns out, throughout flashbacks, that Arjun Devraj, the main character of Seiros, is a really awful human being. The guy is some sort of military operator that does really shady things for money. His girlfriend, or I guess his wife, Nitya, sees their relationship falling apart because Arjun begins drinking heavily and becoming, as Nitya says at one point in the game, a lot like his dad, insinuating that Arjun's dad was also an alcoholic and a violent man as well, and Arjun is just repeating that loop again with his own life. This then leads to Nitya and Arjun growing apart, and during the game there's these cutscenes, kind of like in Returnal, where Arjun is seen repeating a moment in his life involving a hotel room. It's very much insinuated that Arjun cheats on Nitya with some woman, it's not said who, doesn't really matter, and that this hotel room represents that as Arjun's sin, I guess, that he committed against Nitya. It does get worse though, because one guy at your base on Carcosa is named Sebastian, who nobody else talks to, so it's very obvious that this guy is not actually there and he's just in Arjun's head, which is confirmed. Anyway, it turns out Sebastian is Arjun's best friend, and he has done shady things with Arjun, I guess, in terms of military stuff in the past too. But Sebastian somehow finds out that Arjun cheated on Nitya, and he plans to tell Nitya all about it. Arjun then decides to end Sebastian, by like, I guess, a bullet to the head or whatever, to protect Nitya from the truth in his eyes. Oh no, how could he? Anyway, Nitya accepts the Echelon program, right? She travels to Carcosa, leaving Arjun behind. He obviously follows her, the game's loops happen, and as you fight each boss in each biome, it turns out that Carcosa, which is literally based on a book by Robert W. Chambers named The King in Yellow, yes, they did not come up with the setting of this game or anything, they just flat out ripped it off from a book made by another guy for their plot here, and then they injected their own stuff into it. Very on brand for Sony, but anyways, they just used this King in Yellow story by Chambers as the basis of Seiros. So Carcosa is the kingdom in that book that the King in Yellow resides in. The king is a, I guess, Lovecraftian cosmic horror entity, if you will, that made his entire kingdom gold and yellow like he is, right? It's all splendor and everyone goes insane when they go there. So the entire game, you're literally traveling through Carcosa until you reach the palace pretty much, and Arjun defeats the King in Yellow. And the bad ending of the game is that Arjun ends up becoming the King in Yellow himself, insinuating that the loop just continues and that his suffering will just continue forever because he is destined to repeat the same destructive behaviors that he always did already, like drinking and cheating. You get the idea. Anyways, a lot of people online I saw posted that Arjun gets cooked because Nitya ends up becoming a lesbian and falling in love with another woman while on Carcosa, and this is true, yes. Although, some people tried to push the idea that it was Kayla, the tech girl that Arjun is partnered with, who ends up with Nitya. But from what I understand, it's another character named Kira, who is kind of not really seen. She's just some female, I guess, colonist researcher or whatever. But anyways, yes, Nitya becomes a lesbian all of a sudden and falls in love with this Kira lady and wants to be with her over Arjun. So in the bad ending, Arjun becomes the King in Yellow and he is granted his desire, which is Nitya, but he's then just doomed to repeat the same process again and again and again. So in the game's secret true ending, the same thing happens again, but Arjun tosses the medallion in a way that signifies the King in Yellow's power over Arjun into the sea. And then by doing this, Arjun rejects the cycle and doesn't become the king. Instead, he meets Nitya on the beach, who is also alone now, because I assume Kira, her lesbian lover, is also dead, I guess. Apparently, Nitya was the one who was trying to use Carcosa's powers to bring Kira back so they could be together forever. And the game just ends with Nitya basically leaving Arjun for good, and he's left to face the past and his mistakes, and the game ends. No idea if Arjun makes it back to Earth or even if he could, but by the flashing red and blue lights of the police siren on him at the end of the game, I would assume they're probably saying that it means that Arjun either goes back to Earth and he's arrested for, ending Sebastian, or he just stays on Carcosa somehow, or maybe leaves and begins life anew somewhere else. It's ambiguous. What are you going to do? Like, the story isn't bad, but it's not nearly as terrible as, say, like a Spider-Man 2 or Horizon or anything. I'll give it that much. But unfortunately, it still falters by having a somewhat poor character writing, and again, most of the side characters are pointless and annoying again. Like, did I also mention that all the side people kind of kick the bucket too? Like, Tack is shot dead. That's the they-them dude. Sheridan, the leader woman, ends up going berserk because Carcosa makes her go mad, so Arjun just puts her down. Kayla's kind of left ambiguous. She's apparently meant to personify the truth in the game, I guess. And basically everyone is gone by the end except Nitya and Arjun. And again, it's not terrible, I guess, but it still falls into the similar pitfalls of every other PlayStation 5 exclusive, and the way the story is told especially. It's even less interesting because Carcosa as a setting is ripe with potential, and personally, the way that it is utilized here feels almost shamefully not enough in my opinion. Carcosa would have been an excellent setting for a Soulsborne game or something more open world-like to actually explore and learn about. Because like I said, the entire game is you repeating the same levels and the loops over and over to get further until you beat it. And every Echelon member becomes one of the gods that you end on Carcosa at the end of each biome. Apparently, Carcosa can just turn people into gods because why not, I guess. There's so much untapped potential here, however, that is just never fully explored and could have been really amazing if Housemarque could just get out of their own way and stop limiting what they could do here. The Lucenite you obtain, which you use to level up permanently in the game, is what Soltari the Corporation is also after. And it would have been amazing to expand on that idea further and say that the Lucenite was some form of Carcosa's power that evolves humans beyond their evolutionary means, effectively turning them into something beyond what humans are capable of, right? That would be cool, and that Soltari could have been hunting this material to turn their people into superpowered beings too, but that isn't really explored. The entire game could also just be seen as a metaphor, and that none of this really happens at all either. It could all just be in the mind of Arjun when he's drunk or something too. I like to think that it's real because otherwise what's the point? But either way, Housemarque almost had it. They almost broke that cycle that most other Sony first-party PlayStation 5 games keep committing, which is that they almost broke the curse that all these games are facing. By the way, spoilers are over now, so it's all good now. But this is what I mean. Every Sony game to some degree now is the exact same thing, which in my opinion, the easiest way to explain it is like this. Every Sony game is just untapped potential that is being held back by the writers at all of these studios. Because every game mentioned has the same strengths and weaknesses, and it's tiring to see it happen again and again. The game design is stellar. The sound design of all of these games are amazing. Graphically and the art, it's all off the charts. Saros' Carcosa looks beautiful, and I do think the gameplay of the game is great. But the way they tell the story, the forced nonsense, the way they keep injecting modern day stupid stuff like, look, this guy's a they-them or whatever, it adds nothing. It just comes off as tiring and pandering at this point. It's like every time a new Sony first-party game gets announced, I have to think to myself, how are they going to screw this game's concept up too? You know, it's happened so many times already that at this point, it's a matter of when it happens now, right? Like the main guy in Saros is played by Rahul Kohli, right? He does a good job with what he's given. Unfortunately, for the vast majority of the game's runtime, he's not really given much of anything to do with his acting. There's a bit at the beginning where Rahul Kohli's Arjun Devraj kind of gives off this brooding soldier vibe as he tells the other colonists to keep it together. But the problem is, while the main character here is fine, for what he is, I guess, it's the surrounding cast besides Nitya. They just fall completely flat, and that's so many Sony games now. Everyone else in this game is forgettable and pointless, and so much more could have been done to expand Saros from being a great game to play, but not to enjoy as a story if these writers just got out of their own way. All of these games, man, it's just the same things, the same sins, in an endless loop over and over forever. If it's not progressive elements, it's something else. Oh, we can't end Abby, even though Ellie wiped out everybody else. Oh, it's called Spider-Man 2, but we can't have Peter save the day and overcome his weaknesses because Miles is better now. Oh, we can't have a female protagonist who isn't gay. I mean, if Ellie is that, why can't Aloy be too? Oh, look, it's Ratchet and Clank. Don't you love them? Well, you should have, love Rivet and Kit more, because look, Rivet's a girl. Okay? It's just at this point, it's very clear to me that Sony has a mandate of some kind where all of these franchises need to be as insanely diverse as humanly possible, and it comes off as nothing more than pandering. And I didn't even mention another real problem that I saw in Saros too. This isn't really a spoiler because it's so early on in the game, but anyways, what I noticed in Saros is that every single character who is white-skinned is wiped out from the game story. Literally, the first thing that happens in the passage when you first enter it at the beginning, Sheridan shoots a white colonist dead. There's another colonist named Jerome. He's the only other capable colonist alongside Arjun, and he's a white guy too. Yet at the end of only the second biome, it stated that Jerome off-screen is torn apart and wiped out by the Carcosan aliens, I guess. The only other white characters is a bald-headed lady whose name I forgot, who also gets taken out because, of course, she does. And the only other white character I think that lives, if you can call it living, is another bald-headed white guy that you can randomly find and talk to in your runs, and he delivers exposition. If I remember correctly, I think his name is Eli, but I'm just kind of sick of it, right? It's in every game that Sony does now. It's just progressive nonsense and thinly veiled hate masquerading in different games. There is a guarantee of quality that is constantly met by Sony when it comes to gameplay or graphics. Yet I'm just left here wondering, why isn't there the same for the story and the characters too, you know? Like I said, all of these games mentioned, including Saros, are technically impressive or visually stunning to some degree, but the issue that me and I know many others have is more subtle here. It's about the tone and the priority. It feels more like Sony's first-party games are being influenced by cultural trends more than what their players actually want to see. And this polarization, which is probably the most evident in Last of Us 2, is that it just divides players, and that we're seeing that in a lot of PS5 titles, is that they're also selling less than the PS4 ones, especially the sequels to those PS4 games too. It's not that they're terrible games, but they're still not doing as good, and when you compare it to how Sony used to make games or tell their stories, it was different. Now their games are just full of division and skepticism instead of just being things that people loved. What it feels like to me, all the examples given here, this is all a symptom of a single thing, which is overcorrection. They keep believing that they need to hit all of these different metrics in order for the game to be successful, but what it ends up doing is they think these ideas will appeal broadly to and avoid controversy, but instead they always do the opposite. And this just ends up losing people because they're sick of seeing this stuff being pushed in their faces so often, and that's where the disconnect lies. And like I said, while sure some of these games may still sell well, like a Ragnarok or a Last of Us 2, it's undeniable that these games have slower legs after launch like a Spider-Man 2 does, and a far more divided reception and less cultural staying power too, so that it makes you then wonder if PlayStation is still setting the standard these days, or if they're just trying to maintain it, you know? It's not just a Sony problem, I get that, but it's weird how common it is in Sony. That's the problem here. And to me, it makes Sony games feel like they're losing what makes them special, because they want to pander to who, I don't know, because the modern audience doesn't show up either way, I guess, but at this point, the brand, as in PlayStation, and what I can expect is great gameplay, graphics, and sound design that is attached to a frustrating, terrible, or usually bad story, with annoying characters almost every single time now, unless you're Astro Bot, of course. It has just become predictable, and it feels disconnected to what people really want, because PlayStation might not be dead, but the audience can definitely feel that something has changed and not for the better. And I wonder now, how long will Sony continue to do this, and if they don't correct course, will they just continue down a path that slowly just erodes the very identity they have spent decades building? Because at the end of the day, people don't want perfection or corporate alignment nonsense like these people think they want. They want games that just don't talk down to them, that are great and timeless like they used to be, yet instead these games are more focused on pushing modern progressive values over what speaks to everyone instead, you know? And I'm wondering if when the next generation of games comes, if Sony will continue to allow this destructive behavior to keep defining where they go next, because it is literally everywhere over everything they have ever published this generation alone. Until then, Sony, like its players, are just going to be stuck in an endless loop of games where they're fun to play, but their story and their characters and their messaging are constantly undermining what should otherwise be mega hit classics, and it sucks to see. But what do you think? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you guys next time.